Hey guys, and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Monster Hunter Wilds. Today we look back at Longsword, a fan favorite, one of the most popular weapons, and that is only more so the case after that beta. The thing is, it was also comically strong and is in contention for one of the most improved weapons in Wilds, as well as the general output and speedrun times being very good. But is it really that strong? Why is it so good? Is this too much? Today I want to talk about all of that, so let's begin with what's actually going on with this weapon in Wilds. Again, this assumes you understand Longsword or have some kind of familiarity with it, like the spirit gauge system. Obviously red is the highest level, and that's where you're going to get access to, your Helmbreaker, that kind of stuff I assume you know. So familiar stuff like the overhead slash combo leading into crescent slash, this is going to be a great way to build up the gauge, at least initially. You're going to be fishing for your classic foresight slashes. We can still do the special sheath, which still leads into EI slash to generate more of your gauge quicker. Or obviously we have the Spirit Slash, which is the true counter that I'm sure a lot of us will still be doing. This remains a great way to kind of combo. Here I'm in this combo, the monster's about to hit me, let me just prepare a special sheath and counter, right? That's still the thing. If I'm in the middle of a combo and the monster isn't going for an attack, but I'm stuck in an animation lock, I'll still do it to go for the slash to generate some damage and maybe some spirit gauge. This is all very familiar stuff. And outside of red gauge, it's not changed a lot, but we do have the focus mode aiming, which is a lot more impactful than you might realize. Whether you're using the lateral fade slashes to move around in the middle of a combo, staying on the target, or say some of the longer combos and you've missed, turning around to accurately hit the target using focus mode. It's really impactful. Now, speaking of being on the target and staying on the target, the spirit combo has changed. Instead of forcing you to do this combo stood still, we're now able to actually move during the combo. You can go sideways or forwards or backwards. Look at the distance we can get forwards and backwards as well there. This is really nice for staying on the target and also making the spirit combo a lot more viable. But another thing we have to generate spirit gauge levels is to simply hold it, doing the new spirit charge. This, as you can see, will charge the spirit gauge, which is really nice. But obviously, if you land that, it's the final round slash attack that will level you up. But you don't have to hold it that long. It's as soon as you actually flare, now we can release it. And as you can see, that'll level us up. This is an incredible way to open a fight or just find those little opportunities to get a quick level up. It does consume stamina while you hold it though, but god is it worth it. But then things get really interesting when we actually hit the red gauge, so let me go ahead and level up. So now we're in the red gauge, our basic combo has changed. It is now the crimson slash combo, and as you can see, it attacks really quick in a much more aggressive multi-hit combo compared to the basic attacks before red gauge. So this is really good and will be a great way to hit multiple parts, reach high, aim really well with focus mode as you can see, and generate wounds or finish them off and open them if you need to. You'll also notice that when I'm pressing stuff, I'm not losing red gauge anymore. It's just going down naturally. That is because the red gauge is based on a timer now instead of spending it as well. I believe it lasts about 50 seconds, and if you do things that would normally level you up, that will refill some of the gauge as you can see, and that'll buy you a little bit of time. But that's not the only thing that's changed when you're in here. Take the classic counter, Foresight Slash. That has changed into the Foresight Whirl Slash, which basically just gives you more mobility, more distance on the Foresight. It's like slightly better, and I find that it repositions me well if I miss it a lot better than the normal one. Staying in red gauge a little bit longer then could be worth it. There's also another change in red gauge. There's a new finisher. Let's say you do the full Spirit Blade combo. At the end of this, after the round slash, you have spinning Crimson Slash, which can be done after that. Or say you do a Spirit Charge, it can also be done after that too. This is just basically an extra attack dealing more damage and giving you a little bit more mobility, since you're able to really turn around with it as you can see. The other thing I should mention is the focus mode attack though, nothing to do with red gauge. Basically, it's called Unbound Thrust and you attack a wound with it and it will consume it. When you do that, it'll level up the gauge by 1, which is really nice. The thing is, if you create multiple wounds and land a multi-hit with this focus mode attack, breaking multiple wounds, that will level up the gauge by however many wounds you hit. So that's going to be vital to open multiple wounds, not break them with basic attacks, spend your spirit gauge, and then re-level up instantly using your focus mode attack. But now let's talk about, obviously, Helmbreaker, which is kind of nuts. Firstly, during this thrust animation, you have hyper armor. As you can see, this means that you will take reduced damage and you can't be interrupted. When you're in the air, you can be interrupted, but while you're in the air, you can now sheath the weapon with square or R1 like normal and cancel the Helmbreaker, which, doesn't lose you the spirit gauge, which is kind of insane. If you're going to miss or for whatever reason it's bad, you can do that. And then we have the new Spirit Release that you do after landing a Helmbreaker. It basically deals extra damage to the location you hit with the Helmbreaker and can be applied at range, and also has hyper armor, which means you can use it to tank some of the big hits. Like I've used it to tank Ray Dow's big lightning blast during his enrage. It's nuts. And there's a lot to be said about, is this overtuned? In any case, we have more ways to level up our spirit gauge, more things to do with a red level gauge, a new finisher which deals even more damage than Helmbreaker, and it now features lots of hyper armor. You have more control over the aiming and control of your character with all the ways they've increased the movement during different abilities, say during red gauge or in general during the spirit combo, and obviously focus mode aiming. This has felt like the best and strongest, smoothest version of Longsword I have ever played, and there's a lot of debate on if it's too strong, which, we're about to talk about, but there is one thing I want to quickly remind you guys of. You can generate mount attacks by leaping from the back of Seikret or your Palamute like in Rise, and then just pressing R2 to do a spirit combo. It raises you in the air, hits multiple times. It's a great way to generate a mount. It can also be done while you're sliding, which is still a really useful thing. But there's a new dismount attack for everyone, which is triangle and circle or light and heavy while you're on the Seikret, and it will dismount you with an attack. But the thing about that one for Longsword is that it's actually a parry. So if you time it as you're about to be hit from the back of the Seikret, you will parry, nullifying the damage and leveling up your gauge by 1. Kind of hilarious and random. Is that going to see much use in real gameplay? Probably not, but it is cool, and yeah, they gave Longsword in Wilds so much. So those are a bunch of new options and things you can do. What should you actually be doing with Longsword in Wilds? Well, obviously you want to level up the gauge using a mix of the new spirit charge attacks, EI counters, a lot of them, and foresight slash counters and focus mode attacks when possible. Under that, we use the spirit combo when we have to, which can actually be useful in some moments and against certain monsters for sure. Following it up after a successful EI counter is a good way to do it. Damage is always damage, but min-maxing your way to red gauge is a familiar process in Wilds. That's because the EI counter is still incredible for building spirit levels, though Foresight Slash is still relevant and a good fast panic tool. But ultimately, the EI counter is the bread and butter way to ignore every monster attack and yet still deal great damage. The issue with the Foresight counter by comparison is that the parry attack must land. Then you have to follow it with a round slash, and that must land too. The EI counter instantly hits much more consistently when landed successfully, and it happens the moment you land the counter too. Therefore, speedrunners are absolutely spamming this counter still. But should you? If you want to cut the weapon down to its base elements and consider what is the strongest thing to do in every moment for the fastest kills, then yeah, that's going to be a lot of EI counters, but the weapon is now much more than that in this version. The Spirit combo has more mobility than ever. The red gauge version of the light combo, the Crimson Slash combo, is really effective. The upgraded version of the Foresight Slash provides more mobility, as does the new round slash follow-up. You should enjoy the weapon how you want, but a mix of EI counter, the new Spirit Charge attack, the focus mode special attacks, and some Foresight Slashes when needed, that's going to be the best way to level up the gauge. Having said that, after landing your full Helmbreaker and release combo, you do go down 2 spirit gauge levels. Recovering that with 1 EI counter can be instantly comboed into the last part of the spirit combo, which, if successful, will bring you straight back into red just like that. And you can follow up that round slash into the new follow-up, the spinning Crimson Slash, if you hit red gauge during this moment. Overall though, when you're in red gauge, you can benefit from various enhancements, but will continue to land counters when needed while looking for the ideal Helmbreaker into Spirit Release follow-up. That should be done at a weak point as always, since the Helmbreaker damage will decide where the release damage goes right after. And remember, you do have this hyper armor on the thrust during Helmbreaker and during a good chunk of the release, so you can get away with a lot more than normal, which is why some people are a bit mad that Longsword is overtuned in this version. In regards to the opener for the weapon then, you ideally want to do a sneak attack because that causes a kind of stagger on the monster. This can be instantly led into a spirit charge for an instant level up before the monster can even recover. Then you can get yourself into a nice special sheath for an EI counter landed on the raw, so that can be followed by another instant EI counter to punish whatever the first attack the monster does to put us into red gauge. From here, we can send out a Helmbreaker on the weak point as soon as we can with a Spirit Release follow-up, and then continue with the usual priorities. So that brings us to the conclusion of this version of the weapon. Is it too much? People upset by it? Valid. In my opinion, it doesn't matter how good it is. We're talking about a non-PvP game that is mostly played solo or online with friends. It doesn't really matter if one weapon is better than the others. Is it actually better though? Well, in terms of the speedrunning times, Not necessarily. Some of the faster times that I'm aware of at this exact moment are actually things like SNS and the heavy bowgun. We're talking about clear times that are under 4 minutes in the beta before we have skills, though they are using, say, heavy bowgun for the weapon buff, putting monsters to sleep, double damage on a rock pull down, a lot of rock pull downs. So without those benefits, just roll the weapon, not even a palico. We're seeing almost 4-minute runs with longsword, which is certainly very impressive. So I think the reality is that it's definitely up there. He's not making use of rocks and the heavy bowgun and so on. I think what's more justifiable is the fact that it has hyper armor on the thrust and especially the release follow-up. It's a funny concept because if that full release didn't have hyper armor, I could imagine a lot of people doing a Helmbreaker and then no matter what's going on, letting out the release and then being interrupted and being a bit mad or upset. I bet in actual testing for the weapon, that happened a lot. And so maybe they realized they had to give it this protection. I compare this to, say, Switch Axe's new move, the full release slash. That's actually the hardest hitting part of that new kit, just like, say, the release of Longsword. Does that have hyper armor during the animation? Absolutely not. And it's a much longer, slower, more exposed animation. The damage comes out on your right side specifically, so you also have to position for it. Does the follow-up that gets you back the switch gauge you're going to need after you expend all that resource give you hyper armor? Nope. These are very comparable combos and powers and build and spend concepts, and yet one of them has hyper armor, making it incredibly easy and effective, and the other has 0. So it is a kind of weird, like, what's the balancing here? There's a very good chance, though, I would think, that some rebalancing is going to happen for all the weapons after this beta to launch. We may see different movesets, numbers and timings. We may see changes in hyper armor. I don't know. But does it actually matter? Again, I don't think so. What's interesting is this was all without the, of course, sheath skill, quick sheath, which speeds up your weapon sheathing. So this was slow sheathing we were playing with in the beta. It's only going to be significantly more effective, the whole EI counter spam, in the full release, assuming they keep that skill and how it worked before. I mean, relative to every other weapon, Longsword definitely got a lot of new stuff. Core gameplay improvements like the spirit combo movement stuff, entirely new moves to benefit the main loop like the new spirit charge, enhanced originals like the foresight slash, the new crimson combo, and so on. It feels like this weapon had a lot of attention and love relative to most weapons, especially when we look at, say, light bowgun, heavy bowgun, especially light bowgun, that got a lot less. I do think it's still an extreme success for the fantasy of the weapon though, whatever the case. Take that anime as hell mount finisher where he lands and then sheaths the weapon slowly, and of course the damage comes off once he finishes that sheath. Or the very whirly nature of the red gauge foresight slash and the new spinning crimson slash. It looks incredible and it feels amazing and it's performing really well. Maybe it's got a bit too much packed into its kit, especially with the hyper armor, but there's no denying that this is really cool and for longsword players, just really fun. So I think if you were remotely interested in longsword in Wilds, this is definitely a good time because it's one of the best versions in my opinion. So what do you guys think about longsword in Wilds? Are you happy? Are you jealous? Do you think it'll be changed in the full release? Let us know. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.